Hello, this is Papa G, and welcome to Papa Can Cook. Today we're going to be making arancini, Italian rice balls. I'm actually making this to bring to Thanksgiving dinner that's being hosted by Mary and Sister Prudy. Now this recipe for rice balls is based upon Prudy's recipe. I've made some modifications, minor modifications. I cook the rice a little differently. And one of the ingredients, which I'll get to, is different in order to make it dairy-free. Rice balls essentially are gluten-free. The ingredients don't have any gluten in them. It's rice, parsley, there's some dairy-free cheese, which I'm going to talk about, and salt. So you can safely make this for somebody who is highly allergic or celiac, as long as the utensils and environment that you're cooking in is free from any cross-contamination. So ingredients, biggest one is rice. I use a medium grain rice because when you cook it, and you cook it the way I cook it, which is the way that sushi rice is cooked, it has a better texture in the rice bowl, I think. I'm going to be using parsley, which I just cut from my herb garden. It's still going strong. And salt. There's going to be salt in the recipe. And this is a major difference. It requires cheese. Typically Parmesan cheese. If you're not dairy, if you don't have an issue with dairy, then just use the same amount of regular Reggiano Parmigiano type cheese. This is a substitute. It's a dairy and gluten-free Parmesan. It's very tasty. You really are not going to be able to tell the difference in a dish like this. So I'm not using this or Parmesan. I'm going to be bringing this to the family, the extended family, tomorrow, but I'll be posting this after Thanksgiving, so they won't know. And I'm sure they won't know the difference. Anyway, so those are the ingredients, very simple. Now I'll show you how to put it together. First thing with this recipe is you have to make the rice. But before you make the rice, I recommend that you rinse the rice. It helps to remove the additional starch so that it doesn't become a mushy mess. I'm doubling this recipe. The standard, the single recipe calls for 3 cups of rice. This is 3, 5, and I'm doubling it because I'm bringing it to a large family gathering. The 3 cups of rice will typically make between 16 and 18 rice balls. So I'm doubling that for this. And what I'm going to do is rinse it with cold water. You want to look at the water that's coming out the bottom in the sink, and you should rinse it until it runs clear. And then once that's done, I'm going to put it in the pot, and I'll show you what I do when I cook it. Okay, now we're going to cook the rice. I'm going to transfer the rice. I've already rinsed it. Transfer the rice into a saucepan here. Now I use, if you read the directions on cooking rice in most of the boxes or bags of rice, they'll basically say 2 cups of water for every cup of rice. I don't use that much water in it. It comes out better. It's a little bit more like the way you make sushi rice, so I use 1.5. So for the 6 cups of rice here, remember I doubled the recipe, I've measured out 9 cups of filtered water, which is what I'm going to put in here. And then I'm going to put salt in the water. I'm using a tablespoon. You would use half that amount if you're using a single recipe. And then I'm going to turn on the heat. Turn on the right burner. Just give it a stir. And I'm going to wait for it to boil. When it comes to a boil, turn it down to simmer. The key with rice is don't peak. You're going to leave it there for 20 minutes simmering. At the end of 20 minutes, you turn the heat off. Keep the lid. Do not lift that lid up at all during that period of time. After 20 minutes, you keep the lid on and you just turn the heat off and you let it sit for another 10 minutes. Then you take the cover off and you can fluff it up. We're going to have to do that, and then I'm going to let this rice sit open, and I'm going to stir it every so often for a couple hours because you want it to cool down before you use it. Do not put it in the refrigerator because putting rice that you've cooked in the refrigerator tends to ruin its texture. So cook it, let it sit for 10 minutes with the cover on, then take the cover off, keep fluffing it. I usually make the rice, sometimes I'll make the rice the night before and then let it just sit overnight. There's nothing that's going to spoil in it. And then use it the next morning. In this case, I'm making it in the morning, cooking rice in the morning, and then later on in the day, I'll make the rice balls once this has cooled down. The rice has cooled down, and I'm ready now to make the mixture. What I've done is I've divided, if you remember, I made a double recipe. I divided the rice down into 2 equal amounts because I'm going to use a stand mixer to mix this together. You could mix it by hand. That's up to you, but I'm going to use a stand mixer and putting all of that rice in the stand mixer once I believe would overload it. So I'm going to put the rice into the bowl of the stand mixer. Put it back in. I'm going to use the paddle attachment for this. And I've divided, of course, the Parmesan cheese. I grated it and divided it down. I took the parsley, stripped the leaves, and chopped that up. And I forgot an ingredient initially, and that's eggs. So we're going to put 2 eggs in this. Let me get this started. You can see it loads down the mixer, but it's handling it. So I'm going to put the 2 eggs in. That loosens it up a little bit. And I'm going to add the Parmesan cheese and the parsley. And just let this mix well. Doesn't take very long. Okay, that's good enough. So next step is to fry it, and I'll show you how we do that. We're going to shape the rice balls first, and then we're going to fry it. This is one of those recipes that you have to get really intimate with. So we're going to use our hands. They've been washed, ready to go. This rice mixture is extremely sticky. So the way to handle it is get a bowl of cold water with some salt in it. I put about a teaspoon of salt. And then I have a 1/4 cup scoop, which is what I'm going to use. I wet that, and I wet my fingertips, or else it'll just be a sticky mess on your hands. I take about a 1/4 cup, take it out, a little ball, and leave it there. Don't worry about the shape right now. Keep it as a ball. We'll shape it into an egg shape just before we fry it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue laying these out. You want to lay these all out ahead of time. And if you need a second layer, put a piece of parchment paper between it, because otherwise they'll just stick together and make a sticky mess. So I'm going to finish doing these, and then I'll line things up and we'll start the frying. Final step in making these arancini, Italian rice balls, is to fry them. You're going to need a bowl again with cold water and salt in it. You're going to be using your hands to form them, and just be careful when you put them in the oil. By the way, in this cast iron pan, I have about 1/2 inch of light olive oil. You don't want to use extra virgin because it'll burn at these temperatures. I have a digital thermometer with a probe that's in the pan. That's important because you need to monitor the temperature. Keep it somewhere between 350 and 380. Don't go over 400, it'll start to burn. Don't go under 350 because the rice bowls will just soak up the oil and they become soggy with oil. So I'm going to start putting them in. I'm going to wet my hands. Take the balls. By the way, I've done all of them, both halves of the recipe. I'm going to form them kind of in an egg shape. They'll cook better that way. And be very careful when you put them in. Don't drop them because you don't want to splatter hot oil on yourself. Don't dip the ball in the water because that'll just make them very soggy. Plus, it could spatter when you put it in here. By the way, each half of the recipe made approximately 20 rice balls. A little bit more than I expected. It varies depending on how large you make the rice balls. These look like they're the right size. Again, kind of an egg shape. Put them in. You don't want to crowd the pan too much, so you want to be able to stay on top of them. Keep watching your temperature. Right now mine's at 350. It'll go down. In fact, it's starting to go down already. As I put more of the rice balls in here, they'll lower the temperature. If it gets down too low, you want to turn the heat up a little bit. Keep it from going below 350. By the way, a lot of the traditional rice balls have a P in the center. I'm not sure where that comes from. Something I want to look up and find out. I'm not doing that with these. Okay, I got to turn the heat up a little bit because it dropped. Make sure that they stay above 350. Okay, that's enough. I'm going to let those brown. Turn them over. Make sure you have everything laid out ahead of time. By the way, I have a I don't know if you can see it from here. I have a glass dish with paper towel in it, so that when it's finished, I can move them over there. So I'm going to let these cook. When they start to turn nice color brown, not too dark, I'm going to flip them over and take them out. So these have been frying for several minutes on both sides, and they are perfect. You see it's a nice golden color. I'm going to put it over here, take them out. Always watch your temperature, especially when you start taking them out, because the temperature is going to climb because there's nothing in there to sink the heat away from it. So I'm going to take these out. And then, so I don't let the heat get away from me, I'm going to put the next batch. I put about 10 in on the first one. Keep those hands moist so that it doesn't stick to your hands. Okay, that's the second batch. My temperature is holding up nicely. While these are still warm, what you want to do, dry your hands first, is sprinkle some salt. Either have a salt shaker nearby or a container with kosher salt while they're still warm. And then I'm gonna flip them over. and salt the other side. Then after they've cooled, of course, you could serve them. They're best served warm. I'm going to sprinkle a little more salt on the other side. They're best served warm. You can, after they've completely cooled, you can cover them, put them in the refrigerator overnight, take them out the next day, bring them to room temperature, and then warm them in the oven, not very high, maybe 200 degrees, just so they taste better when they're warm. And that's it. They're going to be great.